The 6 to 7 Figure Show, episode 46. Let's hit it.
Broadcasting from the Valley of the Sun outside Phoenix, Arizona. This is the 6 to 7 Figure Show. Tired of working so hard and having no time? Take your six-figure practice and turn it to a thriving seven-figure enterprise. And now, your host, author, speaker, mentor, and strategist, Frank Bria.
Hey everyone, welcome to the 6 to 7 Figure Show. I'm your host, Frank Bria, and today, absolutely thrilled to be joined by Brian DeMarco. He's a business leader, serial entrepreneur, retired NFL player. During his playing career, he suffered a debilitating injury that eventually impaired his ability to walk without assistance. But his love of family, faith in God, never wavered. His legendary recovery actually became his first foray into business with the development of the award-winning product, Primal 7. And the success experience with the building of his own company led him to purpose and passion to help others experience that very same success. So today, Brian's the CEO of DRAFTR Media, which is focused on helping others build legendary brands. A few of the DRAFTR Media brands they've worked with include the NFL's Retired Players Association, the National Domestic Violence Hotline, EasterSeals, and dynamic new eSports brand, Gridiron Gaming. But what drives Brian today is really working with young, fast-growing brands ready to leave their mark on the world. His personal mission is to use his platform to share his journey of faith in Christ and to inspire and motivate others. Brian, welcome to the show.
Frank, thanks for having me. This is great. I'm excited to be on.
Yeah, absolutely. And so we got to start off because those people who are watching this on YouTube are going, okay. And we kind of talked about this a little bit prior to the show too, is CEOs usually don't have the long stringy beard.
This awesome beard that you see, like I still told you earlier, only in Austin, right?
That's right. What is this? Is this a branding thing or what's the story?
Yeah. And it's funny you mentioned that because I literally had my wife and kids come to me and say, we need to build an app for your beard so people can go try it on. Yeah, and it's become its own thing. But no, the beard actually has a cool story, which is really my backstory. I'll share with you here real quick. So as you mentioned, I played the NFL. After I left the NFL, I was really hurt. I was hurt going into my final hit that I took playing in the NFL, but I was just completely broken. I ended up with 17 spinal fractures and an avulsion fracture of my hip. That's where the muscle rips the bone, shears the bone in half. By 2006, somewhere about there, I ended up losing about 90% of the function of my right leg. I was so disabled that, I'm a bit of a gorilla too, so I'm 6'7". I lost the function of my right leg. I was so disabled that both my hips rotted through the flesh on both sides. So I was wearing full-time wound vacs on both sides. I was dying in every way a man can be dying. Physically, spiritually, emotionally, financially. I was a dead man at the ripe old age of about 36. So thanks to a really good friend of mine and an angel on my shoulder, otherwise known as Mike Ditka, who you may have heard of, my wife writes a desperate letter to Mike, and Mike answered the bell within 24 hours. He had people at our door. Within a little over a month, I was in front of the best two spinal doctors in the world. So hope was flooded back into our lives. Now, at this time, I had spent every dollar I made in the league on surgeries, rehab, living, raising our kids. So we were completely destitute. Matter of fact, we were homeless. My wife and I moved a total of 33 times in 3.5 years. I think that's an average of 6 weeks. And I'm counting cars, storage units, vacant houses, you name it. It was rough. And my wife was caring for me 24 hours a day. So we get to this point to see these doctors. So we're so excited. Hope had flooded back into our lives, and we couldn't wait to get out there and hear what they had to say and tell us about this miracle surgery, this miracle drug I was going to take. I was going to walk again. I was going to go back to work, be a man, take care of my family, right? So I'll never forget this as long as I live. They studied me for a week. And after that week, that first doctor, I'm in his office. He looks me dead in my eyes. He knows why we're there. And he says, if you were a horse, we would have shot you by now. Right? Like, great bedside manner, right? So wow. I literally, I laugh at it now, but then it was.
No, I mean, I can't even imagine hearing that.
It broke me down. He knew why we were there. Like, we were there for this hope and this miracle surgery, right? So the next doctor walks in, pulls my wife to the side and says, you need to prepare yourself emotionally to put him in full-time care. He's done. So here I am at the ripe old age of 36. I had the 2 best spinal doctors in the world, I was told, checked me off the list. So my wife and I go back to Austin, Texas, where we live. We're sitting on the front porch of our house that we had at the time. And my wife reached over and grabbed my hands, and we said our first very real, very sincere and desperate prayer to God together as husband and wife for the very first time. And literally through that prayer, the whole concept for Primal 7, that product that we built to help me learn how to walk again, was born. Literally from A to Z, the entire concept. So I don't know how much in product development I got on this. I give the credit to God, but it was, 3.5 years. So we put the first one together. And if you can imagine this, the first one was made out of some ugly yellow truck tie-down straps, the kind we have all laying around the garage, right? Yeah. And an old freight band, those giant rubber bands that we used to, use for resistance when we're training. Except this time it was being used for assistance. So we literally sewed this thing together with fishing line. Wife tied it around a tree. Next thing you know, I'm able to start standing and shifting body weight, doing squats. Squats led to push-ups, led to lunging and bending and all these other movements, right? So 3.5 years of the hardest rehab you can imagine. I threw out my canes and my walker for the last time. And I said, we need to go out and help other folks. We ended up raising about $4.5 million to launch the company, which is another miracle, by the way. Looking like me and being a former NFL player is not conducive to $1 million checks being handed to you. I learned that really fast.
Oh, right? Wow.
Oh, I was getting all these meetings. Everybody wanted to talk about, hey,
sure,
like playing against Reggie White and, and Warren Sapp, and tell me about this, and so I was getting all these great meetings, but I'm like, man, I'm not closing in these deals, right? So I knew I had about 5 seconds to really start talking and bringing the business acumen about 1,000 times greater than anybody else. So anyways, I think it's been about 8 years ago now, 8 years ago or so, Primal 7 wins 2 of the top product design awards in the world. We ended up beating out like Tesla automobiles and Dre Beats headphones, and that was the catalyst to it really going international and across the country, and now it's being used in the best hospitals and rehab clinics around the world. And as an entrepreneur, I got to go full cycle with this, and had a successful exit about 3 years ago. So that was my first foray into business and actually learning how to build a brand from the ground up. Wow.
That's amazing.
So that's a little bit of backstory for you. So sorry it took so long, but that's it, man.
That's totally fine. So how's the beard tie in?
So I'm glad you mentioned that. I totally forgot. So the day that I prayed with my wife for the very first time, I felt God asked me to grow this beard. Now, I was the pretty clean-shaven guy at this point, so I didn't even, I wasn't firm in my walk or anything by that point, right? So I didn't know why I was feeling this. Now, I do now. I completely understand now, why the beard. But yeah, so since the first day we prayed together, I started growing this beard. I haven't cut it since. It has been now, what's funny about this is, like I said, I'm a bit of a big guy, a bit of a gorilla, and I know that I can be intimidating to some, before they realize what a big pansy I really am. But then, it gives people an in. So whenever I'm out and about somewhere, especially when people want to ask you, right? Are you an NFL football player? Were you a wrestler? Were you something, right? They figure it was something. It gives them an in. It gives them a really cool and easy in. Say, hey, really cool beard, man. Nice beard. All that. And that ends up giving me this opportunity to share this story of hope, love, and faith that just happens to be the most incredible love story I've ever heard. And it happens to be my own. And really, I really should mention my wife here, because my wife, Autumn, has been my rock through this whole thing. Now, you can imagine there was a point in time, and I'll tell you this real quickly so you can capture where we came from in our entrepreneurial journey. There was a point in time, my son was born in December of 2005. By February of 2006, my wife had propped me up on the side of a building in West Texas because I couldn't stand on my own. And I'm watching my bride, my beautiful bride, push a mattress to a back of a storage unit. That was home for the next 4 months. So just imagine this. All the folks out there that are listening to this, like, what do you say to your wife the first night you're spending in a storage unit, and that's home? You know, we had a 3-year-old and a newborn.
Yeah.
And you know, and to explain to you how amazing she is, it's cold, it's West Texas, it's winter, 30 blankets piled on top of us, 2 babies in between us, and I'm looking at my wife. And I didn't say all the things that I should have said, like, I'm sorry, and I'll get us out of this, I'll find a way, I love you. I looked at her and I said, what is wrong with you? I was like, are you crazy? I mean, I am broke and broken, and you need to leave me, live with your parents. They'll take care of you. You'll have a life. The kids will have a life. She literally looked at me and said, I made a promise to you and a promise to God, and everything's going to be okay.
Wow. That's amazing.
I was floored. I'm like, how are you this strong? You know, and I was thinking to myself, like, I had known the toughest, strongest dudes in the world, you know, and I had never seen strength like this. So she has definitely been my hero and my rock throughout this entire entrepreneurial journey.
That's amazing. And a really inspirational story. I mean, because I think any entrepreneur, every entrepreneur has got some version of this, obviously not as dramatic and severe as the story that you just told, but you know, there's a little saying that says, if the worst thing that's happened to you is that you've stubbed your toe, then stubbing your toe is the worst thing in the world. So whatever,
that's true.
Whatever anyone's gone through, the fact that you've pushed through it and that you're able to, you know, just basically put aside the negative talk, put aside the, you know, essentially the writing you off completely and just push forward is really inspirational. That's
it's also good not to have any other options, right? So failure, you know, I get it. I mean, we were at our lowest point, but failure from that point was really what's next? Dying?
Yeah.
You know, I mean, everything was taken from us or we lost everything, right? So, you know, that next phase of this is, you know, really understanding the power of thought, the power of prayer, of staying positive, and how do you in the worst of circumstances stay in a positive mindset?
Yeah.
And keep yourself there, because you're going to hear no a million times. And it's how you choose to react to that no that becomes so crucial, and why so many entrepreneurs lose out.
Yeah.
You know, our success with Primal, or even though with DRAFTR Media, and we'll get into that here in a second. I mean, nothing happens overnight.
Yeah.
So it's just how you power through those moments that makes all the difference in the world.
Yeah. I mean, that is the difference. I don't think there's anything else. I think all the tactics, the strategy, the small stuff, I think those are all like rounding error to the just staying with it, to just sticking through the tough stuff. I do want to pivot a little bit here, because your journey, your successful sort of exit out of all of this was through product development and fundamentally, you know, award-winning product development, which pushed you into brand, you know, focusing on brand development. So what was it about that journey? What did you discover as you were putting Primal together for the first time, where you realized that brand was a powerful force here?
I came to it, and look, and it didn't come to this conclusion all on my own here. I had some really great people around me, you know, and I've taken this with me on my business journey. I remember talking to my coach when I was leaving Michigan State. Coach George Perlis was retiring and had this huge successful career. He was the D coordinator of the Pittsburgh Steelers during the Steel Curtain days, and of course his success he had at Michigan State. And I remember asking him, you know, Coach, what do you attribute your success to? And he goes, it's not me. He was like, it is, I have surrounded myself with people that were smarter than me in different areas that have made me look like this. And so I've kind of just taken that into everything that I do. And it's becomes about team building so that you can achieve those unique brand milestones. So it starts with people and culture.
Yeah.
But when it comes to building a brand, I know that we did some things that were fundamentally different. I hated the way things were being done. And I'm talking now, this is 10 years ago or more. Just how some of the things were done. It was very what I call corporate cold.
Okay.
You know, it's the people that are going out there and pushing out content, and it's not really your customer, and you're kind of faking the funk there. I just, that whole faking it or fake it till you make it, that whole thing that brands try to do in the beginning just doesn't work.
Yeah.
And then they end up running on that hamster wheel and in the same spot month after month and can't figure out why they're not doing this. So the focus really comes down to building real community around your brand and real relationships. And that's something we talk about a lot. So now here at DRAFTR Media, that's what I love about doing what I do now, because all the things that we did to build Primal, I get to help other people do that very same thing. But it just comes down to how you're relating to them, how your brand is authentically speaking to your customer. And, you know, and we go through that every day with a wide range of brands, but that's really what it comes down to. How are we being authentic and real, and especially in today's world? I always paint this picture for executives when we talk to them about reminding them about how people consume content now, right? Especially sort of going through social media, and you're on your phone and you're flipping and you're literally scrolling, waiting for that next picture to pop. And do you really think that picture that you purchased for $5.99 that you're trying to make it look like it's about your product, if that's going to work? Is that going to really fly? So I think that authenticity is such a huge, huge thing. That's where it comes to. For me, that's what building a real brand is.
Yeah. And I, in this, I mean, you brought up a really important point, because in this content-based sort of marketing world that a lot of people are trying to build brands in, I do think that a lot of people miss the mark. I think they forget that this line between authenticity and sort of mirroring or mimicking what they're seeing other successful people do, which, you know, isn't authentic at all. But
right.
People do get sucked into this hole of, well, that person was successful, so I got to go do that. I mean, listen, we're doing a podcast interview, listening to your story, hoping to learn some tidbits about this. So how does one stay on the right side of the line of being yourself and authentically communicating to your community versus, looking at other people's successes and trying not to mimic it? Like, how do you stay on your side of the line, the right side of the line with that?
So here's probably a really cool way to explain this. So when we started about a year ago, maybe 9 months ago, when we started working with the Retired Players Association, they came to us with a pretty specific problem. Number one, nobody cares about retired players, right? Then I remind them, I go, listen, nothing is forgotten faster than yesterday's athlete.
Yeah, that's
true, right? And nobody cares. Okay, so how do we make these guys relevant again? And then how do we build something that uniquely ties us into this new audience for sports content? where do we take this?
Yeah.
And that's where we came back to them with the concept of building Gridiron Gaming. So Gridiron Gaming, what was so uniquely special about this, and really the event that we held at Mavs Gaming this past June, which was a huge success. We had some of the biggest movers and shakers in eSports and gaming at the event, which was awesome. But it proved a point of how valuable that brand image is, but then how critically important having that real engagement and how you can grow your brand from these tentpole events and what that can mean to you. In this specific case, and this is a very unique challenge because we had several different demographics that we were trying to connect with and figure out how this all comes together. And so you have your NFL fan, right? You have your millennial that some of these guys probably never heard of some of the retired players we had there. And there are Hall of Famers there. We had Mike Singletary and Jack Young, a bunch of other guys. And then you have your Gen Z, right? Who hasn't heard of them. And here's part of the challenge, that most of these kids that are into Madden and into football today, they're consuming their sports news from the game. Yeah. So as it updates itself, I mean, my son is 13 years old and he's a Madden fan. That's how he learns about what's going on during the season, is what happens on Madden, right? Yeah. So there's no way they're seeing a Mike Singletary or a Jack Youngblood, right, on Madden. So how do you make this connection? So it really hit me. We had this one unique aspect of Gridiron Gaming, and it was after the tournaments were over, after all of the panel discussions were over and all the things we did during the day. We had this specific time where a guy got to play, or a girl got to play Madden Football against one of these Hall of Famers. Like, how cool is that, right? I'm sitting down playing against Mike Singletary as he's playing his Bears, right? What great conversation that makes, you know, when you learn about who these guys are. So I'm wandering around to the beginning of the event, and I see this young kid. He's probably about 9 or 10 years old, and he's checking in. And I just say hello, and he says, "Excuse me, sir." He goes, "But is Mr. Youngblood or Mr. Singletary, are they here at the event?" And I turned around, did a double take. I was like, "What do you know about Mike Singletary and Jack Youngblood," right? And then he went on to regurgitate all of these stats. This young man went back and watched every YouTube video and consumed every bit of data that he could find on these players, and went, wow, we just connected a major dot here between this Gen Z audience and these older players. But across the board, I mean, I think this, you know, esports is a tremendous way for brands to get involved with this. And I'm not saying about you have to go out there and create a brand and run your event, but just being involved with it because of what we see, even with non-endemic brands, right? You're saying, well, my company doesn't have anything to do with tech or anything to do with esports. Why would I be there? State Farm has dumped hundreds of millions of dollars into gaming over the last couple of years. So again, when it comes down to building brand, it was a very authentic approach. It was having an event, having an engagement where you have time to actually meet with the consumer. And the content you create is from those type of events is invaluable. And I don't care how big it is. I mean, heck, we have things planned out for the next year. We're doing these micro get-togethers to these huge events that we're doing across the country for brands. That is a part, I think, where a lot of people miss out on because they don't quite understand how to take advantage of that from a content standpoint for their brand. And I'm glad you mentioned that, because we all hear the buzzwords, right? You know, content is currency, content is king, all of those things. Good content is king.
Right.
and good content means you're just being real, and it doesn't always mean that it's overly produced. It could be something you capture on your iPhone, but just good and entertaining to your customer, right? So don't lose sight of that. And if that was any message, you know, that's something that we have become. It's one of the things that we do best. We are great storytellers here. Yeah. And I love our production team. I think they're some of the most talented guys in the country, and girls. I say that, sorry. But at the end of the day, it's that authenticity.
Yeah.
Be real with your brand, be real with your customer, tell them where you are. Don't be afraid to learn from them, and, you know, take a hit on the chin every once in a while just to learn some insight into your brand.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, I mean, you outlined a really fascinating formula as you went through that. I mean, even if, you know, folks who are listening to this are having a hard time connecting the dots between either tech or sports. I mean, basically, you just taught the audience, number one, figure out who the audience is, identify them down to the demographic. Number two, figure out what the connection point is. And then number three, get your hands dirty, like get into the community, like really start engaging with them. And I do think that in this world of online businesses, that a lot of people take the easy way out and will hide behind their computer, hide behind the technology, and don't make the effort to really get out and have a real conversation with your community, your ideal client type, and find out, you know, what is it that they actually want? How can we connect the dots?
I think a lot of people are just afraid. I think fear, the fear of doing that, having that type of event, you know, could have somebody might say something negative, you know, which I just, in my world, I don't view that as a bad thing. I think those are all ways to continue to perfect and build on your brand. And if you're not really engaging with your customer in a meaningful way, it doesn't always have to be a physical thing, but even digitally, if it's not meaningful, and if you're not learning anything from them, because today's market is just much smarter. They're much more connected.
Yeah.
You have your reviews and your social media, and you know, when you have stats like, I read something of a study it was done a couple of years ago. I think it was in 2014, that like 74% of American consumers will check a company's social media before buying a product or service.
Yeah.
3/4 of my customer, they're checking my social media to see how I'm engaging, what kind of content I'm pushing out.
Right.
That to me makes it important. You know, and for quantifying the bottom line, actually, which was why I dove into that study in the first place, is I always had a trouble quantifying the importance of social media.
Sure.
You know, and then how do I equate this to the bottom line? And that reading that study really just connected the dots for me.
Yeah.
About how important that is, that engagement.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that for a long time, we've been trying to sort of study the specific return on brand investment for a long time. And it's been hard to quantify in a more traditional way, in a traditional advertising way. But the behaviors now with social media and engagement are so obvious. They're so clear. Like, this study doesn't surprise me in the least bit to start to see people checking reviews, people checking, how do you engage? When people are talking about the person running Wendy's Twitter feed, you know, we know clearly brand and social media engagement is a thing now.
Yeah. I mean, that Wendy's story was, that whole thing was pretty amazing how that happened. But it also, you know, I think that's also a good example of being, again, goes back to the authenticity. Like, where do we start with this and building our brand and understanding our brand? Wendy's knew that, look, you're a fast food joint. You know, this isn't a formal, you know, I'm not coming to the tux to go sit down at Wendy's. So so the people that are coming to eat here, I can crack a few jokes.
Yeah.
Make this fun. And I think what you saw was just an expansion of that understanding of their brand, and how they allowed them to interact with people was priceless, obviously.
Yeah.
You know,
I mean, because you can't buy that kind of attention, you know?
Yeah. And it didn't always come off the original post. A lot of the interaction was coming off of how they commented back on something.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. It's amazing.
It is great. And it was great to see, and this again, you know, really the creativity around branding to break out of that box. I mean, it could have been very easy for someone to have showed up, you know, on Monday in work and said, we're a fast food joint, we make burgers. Like, you know, how do you make that interesting? How do you make that exciting, you know?
You know, and I think that's probably one of the things that we do best here at DRAFTR Media. So DRAFTR Media is a full service marketing agency. So we do everything from live events to all of your digital stuff online. But our first step, and I know we do things radically different than a lot of other agencies, and that is, I know at the end of the day, that's why we've had the success that we've had. But I think that initial step of truly understanding your brand, that's the very first thing we do, of understanding your brand, which means understanding what are your biggest hurdles. What have you been having problems with? And typically you get the same thing over and over again. And it all comes down to a lot of executives not truly understanding the full scope of their brand, or how their brand speaks to people.
Yeah.
And so that's one of the things that we do here, is clearly define these guidelines for how we speak, because some brands, like we said, it's okay to tell a joke now and then. Some brands it's not, but at the end of the day, it's being real.
Yeah.
Right. It's being real and being you as a brand.
Yeah.
That's all the difference.
It is. And I do think it's important. I've seen a lot of organizations run into trouble trying to do this internally. So to engage an external group to help them think through some of this stuff, it can be really tough to kind of have a little too close to your face, and you don't really get the outside perspective you really need to.
It is. And I think, and especially if you're a newer entrepreneur, in the agency world, you'll get kind of trucked. And what I mean by that is, you go in, you talk to I hate agency speak, first of all, right? I know what they're trying to do, right? They're trying to set the stage. They're going to throw a ton of money at you. And anyways, I hate agency speak. So I think it's getting in there and helping them to understand in plain English of, look, this is your brand. This is your brand's voice. This is how we actually execute on this. And one of the big difference makers for us is, even with working with the size of brands we do, at times, it's how are we correlating what we're doing from a marketing standpoint to the bottom line. With most of our clients, we hold revenue as a primary KPI. And quite honestly, it's because it's what I hated about other agencies when I was building my other company. I hated the fact that I would say, okay, well, so if I'm making this much, this means you're doing great here. If you're not doing great. Oh, no, we'll never talk to you about revenue. We'll build all of your marketing collateral. We'll do all of your videos. We'll manage your social media, but we'll never talk to you about revenue.
Right.
I never got it. I said, look, we're in this to make money, right? Our business. So, and how do you separate marketing from your bottom line? I just could never get it. And to be honest, I think that's been the catalyst behind DRAFTR Media's success. Nice. Is just word of that getting out there. And again, doing things differently. It was understanding our brand, who we were, and understanding some of the issues that our customer has. And it's funny, we get the same customers a lot. It's the guys that, the entrepreneurs that have been down that road with another agency. Yeah. Spent a lot of money over 4 or 5 months. They've burned through cash. They have nothing to show for it. And here we are, and they get thrown into our lap. So we get all the burn victims, right? So we got to talk them down off the ledge. Right, exactly. It's going to be okay. It's gonna be okay. I was going to say, right. It's going to be okay. Come on down from there.
Well, the good news for you in your business model is that I think there are a lot of people who are burn victims from agencies. So.
Well, and not only that, I mean, we met on LinkedIn. So, you see the same thing on LinkedIn of how many people that tell you they're going to manage your social media. Right. I mean, these agencies, it's some kid sitting behind a computer, right? They pop up overnight, and they think because they had success in their own personal social media, they could help you with your brand, and so you're getting hammered with this stuff constantly. So,
well, or even worse, I've got a good friend of mine. She's a fitness sort of celebrity, and her her Instagram account, is north of 500,000 people, following it. And, she posted something, she and I were joking about this, someone had offered to take over her Instagram account. And then when you go look at their social media account, there's like 22 followers. It's like, she's like, how are you going to?
Well, I can't even say much there. Guilty as charged. I literally, we talk about it every week. Seriously, guys, we don't have much of a social media. No, it's true. It is true with a lot of agencies. We spend so much time, and again, it becomes, I think, a bandwidth thing too, right?
Sure.
So, hey, I got these guys over here working with all these other brands and building their stuff.
Yeah, I think you're
time to ours.
I think you're not giving yourself enough credit. I think you're doing all right. Anyway, Brian, we're out of time, unfortunately. I'd love to continue the conversation, but one last question for you before we go. As those people have been listening to your story, what you're doing at DRAFTR Media, the kinds of things that are keeping you guys busy and really exciting stuff, how can they connect with you? What would you suggest the best way for them to kind of connect?
I think probably the easiest is LinkedIn. Just reach out to me over LinkedIn. Shoot me a DM. You can always reach out to DRAFTR Media by going to draftrmedia.com, and there's a whole little contact us sheet on there that's pretty easy to go through. But yeah, don't be afraid to hit me up over LinkedIn. I'd be glad to meet a lot of folks. However I can serve, I'm there.
Cool. That's awesome. That's really generous. And we'll put both of those links. It's beneath the video if you're watching this. If you're listening, if you're on the show notes page, if you're out listening to the audio out and about, come on back to the show notes page and we got those links for you right there. So again, Brian, thanks so much for sharing your story, sharing the journey, and the cool stuff you guys are up to. Really appreciate it.
Perfect. Frank, I enjoyed it. Thanks for having me.
You got it. And thanks so much for you being with us on this episode of the 6 to 7 Figure Show. I've been your host, Frank Bria, and we'll see you next time. Take care. Bye-bye.